The most simple and safe way to go spearfishing is spear gun connected to rope, connected to float. The basis of this rig is having a shark clip on the back of your spear gun to connect your float line to, like that. As for the actual float line, you can lose your head up your own backside trying to find the best and latest and greatest float line on the market, but after all my years of spearfishing, I've come back down to the simple 6mm polypropylene rope. Why? You can splice the ends. It doesn't lose very much strength at all when you splice the ends. If it gets cut in half, you can splice it back together, or you can just tie knots in it if you really want to. The other type of rope I would recommend is a 6 or 8mm ski rope. It floats, it's easy to splice, it's hollow cord, it's pretty good stuff. The float serves several purposes, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy at all. All it has to be able to do is connect a shark clip to the front, a shark clip to the back, and hold a flag. And of course, be of a bright color, because there are heaps of people out there on the water that can't see a diver in the water, so this really increases your chances of being spotted so you don't get run over by a boat. The other thing about using a float is if you shoot a fish so large that you can no longer hold onto it, you can just let all your rig go and it's connected to this float and swim after this float. Or if you come up off a very long dive and you don't want extra drag when you're surfacing, you can let everything go and then retrieve it once you're onto the surface. You can just hold onto your buoy and then pull up the rope and you can get your spear gun back and hopefully a fish back at the same time. The reason I have an additional shark clip on the rear of my float is for my T-bar stringer. Now this is a spot that you hold all your fish on at the end of the day, and it is a bar of stainless steel that forms a T-section. That's why they call it a T-bar. It's very simple to use. Once you have a fish, you just thread your T-bar through the gills and out the mouth, and then it sits on like this. Obviously this is a piece of paper, but if it was a real fish, it'd do something very similar. One of the major drawbacks to using a T-bar style stringer is that it is on your float all the time, and if you want to put a fish on it, you have to either pull your float line in or swim to your float to put the fish on it. If you're on a patch of fish and you're shooting them hand over fist, it can be a little monotonous and it can slow you down swimming back to the float or bringing the float in every single time that you shoot a fish. In competition situations, this is not ideal. The two varieties of T-bar stringer that you're likely to see are ones made of monofilament and ones made of stainless steel cable. I prefer the monofilament because I feel it doesn't saw through the fish as much as the stainless steel cable does. Also, if a shark hits my fish on a monofilament stringer, it's just going to bite through, take the fish and go. I'm not going to have any troubles like with the stainless steel one where it's going to thrash about and not be able to chomp through and then steal my float. Obviously not a problem here in the UK, but in Australia, if I was using a stringer, I would probably use a monofilament stringer. Removing your fish from the T-bar stringer is as simple as unclipping from the float and then holding the T-bar section up, and all your fish will just slide off into your ice box. The other advantage of a T-bar stringer is it is much easier to tow your fish behind your float. So if you do lots of shore dives, you may want to consider using a T-bar stringer because towing fish behind your float as opposed to in front of your float is so much easier. And that brings us on to the other method of stringing your fish, which is on the actual float line. The next method of keeping your fish is called a speed rig, and this is what is known as a speed spike. It is a piece of welded stainless steel with some loops on the end, and this is connected to the back of the gun with the shark clip. When you shoot a fish, you unclip from this and then place it through the gills of the fish, out the mouth, and then you keep swimming forward and the fish slides down the float line and ends up at your float. The advantage of this is it's really quick, as the name suggests, speed spike. So you can just shoot a fish, string it, keep swimming, keep your eye on a fish that's next on your target list, and they all end up at the float, which is great. The disadvantage of this is if a shark hits your float, it's going to munch through your float line. The other disadvantage is it gets really heavy to tow your float on long swims with a lot of fish in front of it, because the float tends to nosedive with all the weight of the fish in front of the float. So if you're doing super long shore dives, I probably wouldn't recommend this method, but if you're just doing boat diving where you're dropped off on a headland and you just want to shoot a bunch of fish and then you swim back to the boat or the boat picks you up, this is a fantastic method to be doing that. Another thing that can happen when you're using the speed spike method is your fish will sink back down the float line and sit on the bottom. This makes them easy prey for small sharks like wobbegongs and things like that. They're going to munch your fish and straight through your float line. So to mitigate that, there is this little magical device here called a flopper stopper. It is just a small piece of stainless steel with welded eyelets and a small flopper. So when your fish gets sent down the float line up near the float, it goes over the flopper and then it can't go back down and sink off your float line into the middle. Now this part here is a piece of stainless steel cable, so if a shark does hit this, it's not going to bite through it maybe the first time, and then you don't lose your float. I first saw this used by an early mentor of mine, and I've adopted the idea if I ever use a speed spike. I think they're fantastic. I don't know of anybody that makes these, so they're kind of a bit of a homemade sort of thing. I know I got a friend of mine, Mick Dyson, to weld these up for me about 15 years ago. So if you can get your hands on one of these, great. If you can't, the next best thing to do is just splice a piece of rope about this long here, affectionately known as a dog's dick, and that will stop the fish sliding back down as well, but you don't get the stainless steel. That's all there is for this safe and simple spearfishing rig. If you're new to spearfishing, I encourage you stick with a float line, and attach it to your gun, because you are much more visible to other water users. You've got somewhere to put your fish. You're very unlikely to lose your gun, and if you panic, you can just drop everything and you'll be able to recover it again. My name is Daniel Mann. Thank you so much for watching. If you like spearfishing or are interested in spearfishing, consider subscribing to this channel, and I'll see you on the next one.